had a vision that I would like to have my own radio station, and it would be called Radio Pussycat. And it's the subject of my first poem. If I was stinking rich, absolutely stinking rich, I wouldn't buy a football team and I wouldn't support the opera house. No, if I was stinking, absolutely stinking rich, I'd buy myself a radio station and broadcast from nation unto nation. I'd fire the prattling, self-regarding disc jockeys. In fact, I'd have them shot. I'm rich, I can do that. Yeah. And I'd re-employ all the poor old has-beens who were kicked out of Radio 3, those guys who always got the time wrong. I'd have poets as presenters, and certified drunks as hosts for the late-night talk show. There'd be no phone-ins, except, perhaps, for people who had lost their pussycats. I might have a radio psychiatrist, but he'd be lazier than Frasier, and his sole advice to the hazier and crazier would be, ditch him, get a life, or even better, get a cat.
Yep.
And my station would not insist on the news on the hour, every hour, and we wouldn't give a fuck about the traffic. In fact, I'd scrap the news, except, perhaps, for a specialist team of crack journalists who would report on people who had found their pussycats. As owner, I would dictate music policy such that Ambrose rubbed shoulders with Shostakovich and Jeff Beck with John Coltrane, and we'd play Isolde's Liebestod for those listeners still with their partners. We'd broadcast to the Balkans and transmit to Tasmania all the good news about pussycats, with their tails erect like aerials and their little pink bottoms which they managed to keep so clean. Visitors to the station would trip over food bowls and litter trays and find cats copulating in the control room, kittens in the cassette rack, and a warm tabby on the turntable. There'd be no audience surveys, no focus groups, no marketing, and we wouldn't give a toss about the ratings. I am rich, don't forget. We wouldn't carry commercials, except perhaps for cat flaps and flea collars, but they'd get their airtime for free. And in the wee small hours, the world would be enveloped with the sound of purring, like radiation. So that's poem in the first half about the difficulties of dating when you're young. I remember you, Connie Blissenden. I remember you, Connie Blissenden. You exuded experience. I disguised my naivety. We met in the morning, swapped looks in the afternoon, and at the departmental function, instead of putting the world to rights, we plugged into each other's current and left early, exchanging a flavoured kiss on the stairs. I remember you, Connie Blissenden, because we were both up for it and scurried back to the sanctuary of my student room and banged away like a couple of marionettes without sentiment until dawn. I remember you, Connie Blissenden. So what happened to you, Connie Blissenden? Did you become a social worker with the Inuit? Or are you perhaps senior vice president of the First Bank of Montreal? Or did you slide, like many, like most, like me, into a middle age of underachievement. Those frenetic anatomical jabbings tied us tenuously together. But you could have been anyone, Connie Blissenden, and so could I. I used to think, well, I still think a lot about death. The sound beyond the dune was the gasp of a dying mermaid. She was beached on dry sand, her breath pointed and urgent. "I'll help you," he said, but could not shove the heavy tail which flopped down with decision. "I'll help you," he said, and tried to heave her arms and noticed her back marked by a shark and the wicked sting of a ray. "I'll help you," he said, but she was dreamy with exhaustion. "No matter," she replied. "I've swum the 7 seas and loved a Chinese sailor. I've seen battleships and tankers and had coral in my garden." He scanned the empty dunes where the wind waved at the grass. "Please be strong and the tide will come and lift you." She had been a beauty, but there were mollusks on her flipper and weeds throughout her hair. "The tide will come and lift you. You'll see again your garden." "No matter," was her whisper. I loved a Chinese sailor and swam beside a dolphin and diverted a torpedo. I passed the locks of Panama and bathed in San Francisco. He searched the far horizon for signs of higher water. Her cheek fell on the sand. From her mouth came foamy bubbles. Her eyes were dead as fishes. He sat beside the body. "You loved a Chinese sailor and gardened in the water. You died beside a human who lacked the strength to help you." A tide of salty tears sprang up from within him, but not so much of sadness as tears of recognition. Oh.